I worked for Nick from November 49 to March 17th of 53. And then his wife worked it for a little while. And then I don't think she could really take care of the business. And then she sold it to Dick Barnes.
Mm-hmm. I think it was sort of understood that Ruthie went with the building. Ruthie worked in a restaurant across the street from Nick's, and we lost our waitress, one of our waitresses, and my dad knew Ruthie, so he went over and asked her if she wanted a job. And she said yes, and that's the way it started. And actually, it was supposed to be temporary, but it became full-time, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Nick says, well, said we'll give her a week. So I went to work November the 14th in 1949. Mm-hmm. And I've been here ever since.
Yeah. In a way, she was kind of the soul of Nick's, I think, always. And it's really too bad today people don't know her and know that.
And I know Dick was very fond of Ruth. She was very devoted to not only Nick's, but to Dick and his family. Ruth, it was very, so she was a very special person to them, I know.
She wasn't the friendliest sometimes, but with her regular customers, she really developed a great relationship. And anybody who's worked someplace for 40, 50 years, I mean, it says a lot.
She brought the beers back to the table, sat them down in front of everyone, and everyone paid her, and she gave them their change, laid the change down on the table too. And one of the fellows kept looking, he looked down at he was looking at his change, but who could tell? He's looking down at the beer and not touching it, looking up at Ruthie and looking down and looking up at Ruthie, and Ruthie's looking at him, watching him do that. And finally he says, Ruthie, don't you have any scruples? And what he was complaining about was that the change was inadvertently, it was a mistake, but the change was a nickel short or something. And he was complaining that he had been short-changed, and Ruthie grabbed the beer and took it back to the bar and said, John, to the bartender, give me a scruples.
We moved to Bloomington in 1964, and my husband was new on the faculty there. I didn't know anybody, but I knew that he had found a place.
Don Robinson, he walked out one time and was going up the street, and he forgot to pay his bill. And I run after him. Told him he forgot to pay his bill. He came back and paid it.
So I told the guys at the bar with me, at the table with me, just tell that woman who's taking care of our booth that I'll be right back. I'm going up to the bank and cash a check. I walked about 10 steps outside of Nick's, and I heard these steps. And it was Ruthie chasing me down the street, screaming at me, you didn't pay your tab, you didn't pay your tab. And I explained to her who I was, and she explained to me who she was. And we finally settled the bill.
Ruthie and we became good friends just from knowing her, and she's a good friend and a good woman and just a loyal friend.
If Ruthie saw Donna in here, she would serve her, but she would bring me the bill.
That's it.
Also, if I came in at lunch with a female faculty colleague, Ruth was the first one to call Donna's attention to the fact that I had been in here with another woman.
Gene Brady. He called me a fat ass one time. And I told him, I said, you get the hell out and don't you come back until you apologize. And so Mr. Barnes and everybody backed me up. And finally then he came back and apologized to me. And I let him back in then. But that's the only ones, that really give me any trouble. Because I told them what I thought.
Like Joe Kellogg, another legend. He just passed away a couple years ago. 6'4", probably about 250. I mean, a pretty burly guy, kind of lumberjack kind of guy. One of the only people to ever make Joe shut up was Ruth Collier. She was about the only person who could, dumbfound him. She was walking through the front section, and Kellogg was giving her a mouthful of stuff, and she just handed him a breaded tenderloin. Shut up and eat your tenderloin, Joe. That was great.
Ruthie always thought that I would take over for her, and I tried to explain to her for years that, no, Ruth, I'm in college. I'm not going to stay here forever. And she really, truly thought that I would stay there forever. She and I worked together a lot in the front room. She always had the front part of the front section. I don't know if it was because the lighting was better or the tips were better, but when Ruth didn't work, everybody wanted her section.
I always I worked the front section because I couldn't be, I felt like I was closed in. In the summertime, I want my doors open. I don't care how cool it is, and as long as I can stand my doors open, I want them open. And that's why I always worked the first section. I felt like if I worked in the back here, I was closed in. I can't stand that.
I always remember her wearing her flip-flops. When the weather got warm, Ruthie put on her flip-flops, and I used to say, how can you spend all these hours? She always worked double shifts when she was younger, so she'd be here for 16 hours. And those flip-flops, there was no support. She says, well, they're cool and they're comfortable, so.
I worked my shift, and then if somebody else didn't show up or didn't want to work, then I would work their shift. I'd work a double shift. Sometimes I'd be 5 or 6 days a week, but I needed a job. And I would drive from Greene County up here to work, back and forth every day. Rain or shine or snow.
Ruthie used to scare me to death when I was here. And I can remember one time I came in and I don't know what I was doing. Probably I was writing something. So I sat down and instead of a beer, I didn't want a beer. I bought a cup of coffee. And Ruthie brings me the cup. And that was in a day when coffee is about $1/4 a cup. And she wanted 75 cents for it, which astonished me. Why so much? We don't make our money selling coffee. That's what she said. And, well, I paid up, of course. But I didn't give her a tip that day.
I asked them if they wanted an egg, and they said yes. So I took it over and I said, you want me to crack it? And this was Al Tal. I said, you want me to crack it? And he said, yeah, go ahead and crack it. So I cracked it over the head. I got a big kick out of that.
When I first started here, you got to realize, okay, I was 19 years old, and that's when Ruthie was working, I think 6 shifts a week. She'd come in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and leave at 3 o'clock at night. And you got to realize it's kind of shock because I'd never been in here before. I mean, just kind of, I didn't realize what I was getting into when I first started working here. So I just kind of came in and started working. And there's this little short old lady. Well, at the time I thought she was an old lady. And the first thing, she started cussing like a sailor, and I about like jaw drop. So anyway, here I am, 19 years old, and I go, Jesus Christ, what am I in for? But she always had a heart of gold, and she was just another little local girl making a living. But I'll tell you what, she really she helped the tradition of this place, and people still ask about Ruthie.
I loved all my customers, and they liked me. Well, I want to say hi to all of them.